It's me, Tony Home Perm, Long Island singing diva, celebrity impersonator, makeup enthusiast, all around jack of all trades, master of none. That's me. So, today I thought I would do a little video. It's a concept that I've had in mind, and it's called, Don't I Already Have That Palette? Now this is an idea that came to me when I first saw the Natasha Denona mini Xenon palette. That was all over YouTube a couple of weeks ago, that black and silver gray palette that everybody was going crazy over. And I meant to do the video then, but just ran out of time. I had a lot of things going on. And now it's sort of like no one cares about the mini Xenon palette at this point. And long story short, speaking of the, I'm going to show the mini Xenon palette right now. Black, grays, bone, silver. And long story short, if you have the Colourpop Smoke Show, I think now it's called Blow and Smoke palette. If you have that palette, which is this here, then you've already got the mini Xenon palette, because this is all those colors plus some, and it's, you know, you can probably get it for less than half the price of the Natasha Denona palette. So that's when the idea for the video series first came to me, because as I have discussed, I'm sort of on a low buy as far as palettes, and not really purchasing anything unless I really want it, like the Sensorium Beauty Chapter 1 palette, which I just did 2 videos on, and I'll put links to them either down below or in the cards up above. And unless there's something really special about a palette, and I probably doubtfully will be buying from major beauty brands. I trying to stick to indie brands, unless, as I say, unless it's something really special, I'm not going to be buying it. So that's where I stand on palettes right now. Okay, so what had happened was I saw ads and promos and sneak peeks of the new Natasha Denona retro palette, and I'll put a picture of it up on the screen. And it's an expansion of the mini retro palette, and I only have one Natasha Denona palette. I have this little gold mini palette. It's the only one that I have, and 25 bucks. I've never used it except to swatch it once or twice, so I can't really comment on the quality of it. I mean, I've heard good things about Natasha Denona. I've heard mediocre things about Natasha Denona. I know some people are not crazy about the formula, yada yada yada. Anywho, saw these ads for the new retro palette, and what can I tell you about it? Well, on the website it's described as the continuation of the best-selling mini retro eyeshadow palette, now as a mini-size palette, featuring 15 romantic burgundy and mauve shades combined with gray browns, taupes, dusty roses, and vintage pinks, perfect to create romantic retro-inspired looks. The retro eyeshadow palette is the retro version of the cult favorite Glam eyeshadow palette. Okay, so that's how they describe the palette, and it retails for 65 bucks. And I was looking at it, and I'm not usually inspired by Natasha Denona palettes, and I was looking at it and I said, there's something about the color story that really appeals to me, because I do like those kind of colors, those like burgundies, mauves, Gray browns, taupes, dusty roses, vintage pinks. I do like that color story. And then I realized, I do like that color story. And I'm looking at this retro eyeshadow palette, and why does it remind me of a Colourpop color story? I stared at it and I said, wait a minute, hasn't Colourpop done these kind of colors like a gazillion times over? And more to the point, don't I already have some of those Colourpop palettes with the same exact color story? So I said, okay, we've got to go through our collection of eyeshadow palettes, and I'm sure I probably have something quite similar to this palette. So, my first thought was to start with my Colourpop palettes. And the first one that I came across that I felt had a similar color story was the You Had Me at Hello palette from Colourpop. And when we open her up, we can see, what do we see? Very similar to the Natasha Denona with burgundy and mauve shades, dusty roses, pinkish. I mean, and when I say similar color story, it's not a dupe. I'm not saying that these or any of these are dupes for the Natasha Denona palette. They're not dupes. They just have a color story that, in my opinion, you could create very similar eye looks that you would be able to create with the retro palette. And I think this is certainly one that could do that. Now, however, there was not just one Colourpop palette that I felt had similar color story to the Natasha Denona retro palette. I also found the All I See Is Magic palette. And when I opened that up, what do we have? We've got, you know, burgundy and taupe and sort of mauve kind of colors, very much in keeping with that same color story. This one maybe is a little more different than the Natasha Denona retro palette, but it's similar. It is similar, and I think there are quite a lot of looks that you could create with both palettes that would be very similar, and I'm sure there's colors that once they're on the eye are very similar too. Now, another palette, also from Colourpop, that I thought had a very similar color story, is the Hocus Pocus palette, the Gather Round Sisters palette, which came out last year around Halloween. And if we open her up, what do we see? Very, very similar. Burgundy and taupe and dusty rose. And I think there's a sort of a greenish brownish color in there. So this is definitely a very similar color story to the retro palette, and I think this could be used to make very similar looks. Still one more Colourpop palette that I think would work. The It's My Pleasure palette. And now I know, at first, I don't know what made me open it, because I've always thought of this as a very purple palette. But, however, when we open her up, yes, it is purplish, but there's like your burgundy and the dusty rose pinkish, taupe kind of tones, and I think this is another one that it has a very similar color story. So I thought that could definitely be included. Next, here's one that I used to use this palette all the time. This was like my go-to, and I completely forgot that I stopped going to it. It's the Morphe Jaclyn Hill. This is, I believe, from the Vault. I forget which one this is. But it's the burgundy, taupey, rosy one with that little bit of purple. And as I said, when I saw the retro palette, I was very much drawn to those burgundy, taupey tones. And why? Because I already have burgundy, taupey tone palettes in my collection, and this is one of them. So, as I say, if you already have any of these in your collection, then maybe you don't need the retro palette because you have palettes with a similar color story. Okay, this is one. When I pulled this out, I was really surprised. This is one I picked up at Walmart, I don't know how long ago, and I've never used it yet. The Physicians Formula Rosé All Play palette. And I think you can still get this at Walmart. I think it's still on the shelf. And actually, this is like really close as I look at it. Like the burgundy and the taupe and the dusty rose, pinkish. This palette is really similar in color story, and I have to try this palette at least once. I don't think the pigmentation is too bad, really. I mean, if you look at that, that's not bad. Let's see how this brown is. Not bad. So it's not terrible for a an inexpensive palette you would pick up at Walmart. I don't know how the shimmers are. Not bad. So yeah, I had to include this one in with all of the others. Okay, so another palette I came across in my collection is the Dose of Colors Marvelous Mauves. We do know there are mauves in the retro palette. I don't want to blind you with that mirror, but now this is all matte. There's no shimmers, but I tend not to use shimmers all that often anyway. But you can see you definitely got some of the similar tones in this little palette that you have in the retro palette. Mauve, dusty rose, pinky. So if you have this, maybe you don't need the retro palette. I know I'm not going to buy it. I certainly don't need it. I've got enough here. Another palette I came across in my collection that I felt had a similar color story is the Colored Rain Power palette, I believe it's called. And when we open her up, you can see we've got, burgundy, rosy, mauve kind of colors. It tends to go a little bit more purple. Actually, as I look at this is very much the same color story as my little Jaclyn Hill Vault palette, the burgundies and that bright purple. The Colored Rain formula is really nice. I mean, very pigmented. Wow, look at that. So if you have this palette and you were thinking about getting the retro palette, maybe you can say, you know what, I can save 65 bucks. I don't need it. So okay, now last on the list, but certainly not least, is a palette that you may have in your collection already, and it is one that seems to be a dupe for a lot of other palettes. I first commented that it could be a dupe for the Jeffree Star Bloodlust palette. Another YouTuber, Elaina Glam, whose videos I love, she just did a video where she compared this palette to the Norvina Volume 5, I believe. And she noticed that this palette had a lot of similarities to that. And I am saying that this palette could also be a dupe for the Natasha Denona Retro palette. And I'm referring to the Morphe 39S. And this is probably the best palette Morphe has ever done. I mean, this is a great palette. I don't know what else has happened with Morphe, but this palette is really good. And I say wholeheartedly, if you have this palette, you probably don't need the retro palette, because here's burgundies, brownish, pinks, taupey kind of colors. I mean, it's all in there. It's all in there. And I feel you could certainly make very similar looks to the retro palette with the 39S. So there you go. Just a quick little video today, but I wanted to get this up and get my thoughts out there, because with a lot of things on YouTube, if you don't strike while the iron is hot, you're lost. You know, people don't want to watch the videos because it's like last week's news. Nobody's interested in last week's news, not even me. Well, there you go. So I hope that I helped you out a little bit if you were thinking of getting the Natasha Denona retro palette, but were hemming and hawing, maybe on the fence, maybe you didn't want to spend the $65, and you have any of these palettes already in your collection, you can pull them out and say, well, I'll pretend this is the retro palette and I don't have to spend 65 bucks. So, although I'm not saying don't get the palette, if you really want the palette and if it's not a hardship for you to buy the palette, by all means, get the palette. Make yourself happy. This is really for people who might want the palette, but for one reason or another, don't want to purchase the palette at this time, and maybe they could find another substitute. Certainly, I would say, you know, low budget is the Physicians Formula Rosé All Play palette. I know I always see it on the shelf at Walmart. I think it's only a couple bucks. So if you like that particular color story, you could pick that up, save yourself a wad of dough, and probably still get a nice burgundy, mauvey, taupey kind of eye look with it. Quite a few, actually. So I would just like to say thank you to everyone for tuning in to my channel. If you like this video, please hit the like button down below. If you want to see more from me, please subscribe, and please hit the notification bell so that you get notified whenever I do put out a new video. Of course, you can also catch me over on some of my other channels, the Alexis and Tony channel, where I do the Naughty or Niiiiice show with my very good friend, the horror diva herself, Alexis Flame. And if you like my Naughty or Nice t-shirt, you can head over to my threadless shop, where I have t-shirts, tanks, coffee mugs, masks, a whole bunch of things with the Naughty or Nice artwork on them. And you can also catch me on the God'll Get You for That Walter page. That's a podcast that I do with my very good friend, Tom Cat. What we do is watch episodes of Maude, the great sitcom from the 1970s that starred Bea Arthur, way before she was Dorothy on The Golden Girls. And we watch the episodes and we discuss it and just have a kiki and laughs and, you know, discuss the ramifications and whatnot. And you can catch that over on that page. So that's it for today. I thank you all for tuning in. Please stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.